introduction. Yeah, I've done a lot of things, and it's just because I just love giving back to the community so much. And tonight I'm going to talk about extended events. This is more of a database administration topic. So those of you that really are not into database administration, just please bear with me, and I hope you enjoy the talk. Extended events have been around since I believe it was SQL Server 2008 R2, which came out 10 years ago. And DBAs like myself were so used to using this tool called Profiler, and then also traces on production servers. And a lot of us just, you know, had to be kind of drug kicking and screaming to extended events because we were so used to the original tool that we used. And part of it makes sense because we didn't really have a user interface with this. You had to do all this programming, you had to understand XML, and there were just a handful of leaders in the community that were really promoting this. And it took a while to catch on to other people, myself included. So I'm Kathi Kellenberger, and I work for Redgate Software, and I'm the editor of Simple Talk. And they also call me a DevOps advocate there. However, I still feel like I'm pretty much a newbie when it comes to DevOps. So what in the world are extended events? They're really a utility, or I'm not really sure what you would call it, a service or utility that's used to a service maybe that's capturing things that happen on the SQL Server. So one of the things that really held people back is that the data is returned in XML, and originally you had to be able to query that XML to get anything out of it. At some point, and I'm not sure what version of SQL Server or SSMS, they added this real easy to use interface. That still didn't convince a lot of people to go with extended events and get away from using Profiler. And one of the reasons that you might want to use extended events instead of Profiler is that typically extended event sessions are much more lightweight. They don't have as much of an impact where they might affect performance on the server. And also the Profiler and trace are deprecated, which means that they haven't gone away yet, but someday they might go away. I kind of feel like that's never going to happen, but Microsoft is not investing in Profiler and trace. So when new features come out, Microsoft is not adding ways to capture that in Profiler, where they're constantly, every time there's a new version of SQL Server, they're adding more and more things that you can capture in extended events. And I'm not sure why I had these. Well, oh, I guess permission. I'm like, what's this? Oh, in order to use this, you have to create them, you have to have alter event session permission, and to run queries against them, you need to have view server state. So this is typically going to be DBAs that will be interested in this, except possibly like if you're doing development work. I know whenever I was working on SSIS packages back in the day, or working with reporting services or different things like that, sometimes when things would not go the way that I expected to, and then I'd say, well, what in the world is SQL Server? What's the query that SQL Server is actually getting from reporting services or integration services? So it was really easy for me to just fire up Profiler and trap the statements and figure out what was going on. So a lot of folks would say, Profiler, it's, you know, just really, really horrible. It can cause terrible performance. Yeah, if you run it on your production server, that would just be a horrible thing to do. But if you're just running it on your local workstation, it was just super, super easy. But so it took me a while, years, before I got away from doing that and started set up an extended event session that I can just turn on whenever I would like to capture statements like that. So I've kind of covered some of this already. I guess it was 2008. I was thinking 2008 R2. So when I put these slides together, I probably looked it up, which has been a few months ago. So it is a lightweight replacement, and you know, it's going to cover more. It's going to be more useful. And in some ways, it's actually easier to use, even though it's kind of hard to convince people of that. So let's take a look at what an extended event session looks like. And there's a bunch of different pieces and parts of it. They have, you know, packages and all these different things. I'm not going to go into all that vocabulary. I'm just going to show you what's useful. So here in SQL Server Management Studio, and let's just close that up. At the server level, I have, under management, I have this section called extended events, and then I have these sessions. So I'm going to show you, let's see, this one right here. Just let you kind of see what it looks like. The nice thing about it is that even though I've already got it set up and running on my server, I can easily go look at the properties and change it. Now, if you were running an old-fashioned trace, you can't do that. You can set up a trace and run it, but you can't really go back and look at the properties or make any changes. So this is actually, here's already a benefit that you can make changes to it. So, and here I, you know, have some check boxes that I can change some properties. You know, say what it is I want to, here's the only thing I've got selected over here. And this thing kind of drives me a little nuts. I don't really like how you press this configure and things move over. That kind of bothers me a little bit, but I got used to it. So I'm going to go into more detail about all of these little pieces of it, but I just wanted to kind of show you what it looks like. The other important thing besides deciding what it is you're going to capture and how you're going to filter that is on the data storage tab. So I don't think I've got Zoom it running. Didn't think about that, sorry. But I'm going to see if I can find it really quickly. And it might be in the C drive. Hopefully you can see that okay. I've got two different storage categories set up. One of them is called an event file and one is called a ring buffer. It seems like just about every demo I've seen of this, they typically go with the ring buffer. There's benefits, you know, and of each one, there's reasons not to use each one. So the ring buffer returns you'll see the data only in XML, and that is more lightweight. The data is in memory, and it's easy. It's not easy to query, but it doesn't take a lot of resources to query it. So it's really good for looking at things that have just recently happened. Okay, because it doesn't stay in memory. If I stop and restart my session, it'll clear out. If I restart SQL Server, it'll clear out. So this is just if you can look at something that's happened recently. I also like this event file, and by default, it's like a gigabyte file, but whenever you do that, it ends up being hard to query, but it's easy to actually look at. And let me just show you what it looks like. So I can go in here. If I look at the ring buffer, all I have to do is right click and view target data. Okay, well, that's XML. That's nice, but that's not really helpful. However, it's not, like I said, not easy to query, but it is, performance-wise, it's nice to query. And I'll get into that as we go. The package event file, you'll see why I like this one. When I go view target data, you see it in kind of a tabular form here. Notice as I click on each one, you see more details down at the bottom. Now, if there's a certain thing that I would like to see in the tabular form, all I have to do is double click that, actually not double click it, let's see, right click and show in table. And so now it shows up in this tabular format up here. One thing I think really bothers people when they start using this is that the user interface seems like it's spread out over many different things. You know, I've got my extended event session set up over here, and then I've got, you know, this tabular area where the data is, you know, I can see the data, and then I can also filter it, which is this over here. You know, I can set some filters up. I think there's some other things. There's actually some other pretty cool things that you can do. I am not even seeing it. Oh, you can do aggregations. You can do some other, you know, choose columns. But I feel like the user interface is just like spread out too much. And I feel like that what makes it difficult to use at first. You know, I could do something like, this is already filtered for just TempDB, but I could come in here, click on any of the cells and just automatically, you know, add a filter if I want. The tricky thing about this is that if I set a filter today and then I don't go and look at this for 6 months or whatever, and it's been running, when I go back in, that filter is still going to be in place. And that's kind of confused me on occasion, like, why is this not firing? Why is this not working? So let me just go ahead, and there's already some data there from this afternoon when I was making sure everything worked. Let me just show you another one. Configuration items changed. This is probably the one I should have shown you first. And actually, let's see. Oh yeah, that was what we looked at. Thinking of the TempDB one that I'll put together. So another thing that you can do is watch live data. You can watch it as it's happening, and a lot of people do that. Obviously, that's going to go away if you close it or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and make some changes. I read an article about making these changes on my SQL Server, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then of course, I've talked to someone and found out that those changes were not too bright, so I'm going to set those changes back. And hopefully, there we go. So all of those changes that I made did fire, and I can see them and use that information for troubleshooting. Okay, so, oh, I see why it's showing up as TempDB, because I've got TempDB here. So if I change this to, let's change it to master. Let me bring that up again. And run a few of these again. There it goes. That's the thing I don't like about that live data, is that sometimes it just seems like it shows up right away, sometimes it doesn't. And I'm sure there are some properties you can play with to get it to show up sooner, but I typically just really like using the event file and the ring buffer. So that's what an extended event session looks like, and you've just seen one in action. So let's see what else we can learn. Are there any, we didn't really talk about questions. I can stop right now and answer any questions that might have come up at this point.
No questions I'm seeing in the chat.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna move on then. So how in the world do we create a session? Well, you saw that GUI interface that I showed all the properties. So you probably have a clue that I'm going to be using that same interface to create the session, and you would be right. You can also create a session by running a T-SQL script. And I don't know if any of you have ever created traces for SQL Server, but they are not really user-friendly because you have to have all these ID numbers for everything. Typically, when I had to do a trace, I would start with Profiler with the user interface, figure out what I wanted, you know, save it out, save out the definition and, you know, go through all of that to set the trace up. And the trace definition, just by looking at it, it really didn't make much sense, where this at least is much more user-friendly to look at, I think. I don't know that most people do it like this. And of course, through the user interface, you can always right-click and script it out if you want to share it with somebody. So that's pretty nice. So what are the pieces that are needed? First of all, you need to figure out what events you want to capture, okay? And there are hundreds of events. I don't know exactly how many events there are, but I know that that number continues to grow all the time, every time there's a new version of SQL Server, and possibly even when cumulative updates come out. So the first thing you need to do is figure out what the events are. And this part here, it kind of threw me because I was never sure how to map the things I knew from Profiler to extended events. So I will show you how to do that. All the problems I had, I'm going to give you the solutions today. You also have this other optional section called Global Fields Actions. So what these are things that are common to any extended event, event that you might want to capture, okay? And Microsoft calls them actions. However, they are actually, but they could perform an action, all right? And I don't know if you can see this on the slide. Down at the bottom, it says break the process in the default package. All the other ones, well, here's one that says create a mini dump, including all threads. Typically, they will collect additional information. Be extremely cautious on here, on this. Chances are you won't need to check any of those boxes, but you might want to. For example, I've got here client app name, client connection ID, and client host name. Those might be something that you might want to collect. But I would say 9 times out of 10, you can just ignore this section. But be extremely careful that you don't do something that's going to actually perform some kind of action. One thing I didn't mention is that you really can't do something like send an email or some kind of an alert with these. I'm going to show you a couple workarounds over that later on in the session, but basically all you're doing is collecting data, and you can go out and review that data. There's no way to warn you from this without doing something else, and I'll show you that. Okay, so the next tab is filter. This is pretty straightforward. Here I've got database name equal tempdb, and you can add, you know, whatever filters you want. This is another advantage over Profiler Trace, because Profiler Trace, it supposedly captures everything and then filters it, where this will filter it much earlier. It will just ignore, it will ignore, in this case, everything except tempdb as far as collecting. So that's another reason that this is supposed to be more lightweight and less of an impact on performance. Okay, then you have the event fields. Notice that I have the database file size change selected in my events. I could have more than one event over here, and I could also select multiple events if I want. So all of these are for the filters and the global actions. I could have done that. All of these are the ones that are, at least Microsoft or somebody's decided these are the things that you should probably collect, pieces of information you should probably collect if you are using this particular event. Now, somebody's got their mic. You have your mic on. Thank you. So these are all pieces of information that you would probably want to collect if you were wanting to capture database file size change. And here's, this one's got a checkbox. It's optional because you could always figure out the database name if you have the ID. Okay, so as I mentioned, the global actions, those you could add to anything. Those are available for any event. And when you get over to the event fields, these are specific for the particular event. Now, if I had more than one event on here, they might have a different list. Okay. The next thing that you need to do is go to the data storage and figure out the targets. I've talked so far about the ring buffer and the event file. The event file especially, I typically make these much smaller and make them roll over because I don't want a lot of data captured. And typically, you know, it is possible to collect quite a bit of data, so you got to be really careful there. I wouldn't want, you know, gigabytes and gigabytes of these files sitting around when I'm never going to go back and look at that data. And it's harder to query them when they're really big like that as well. Okay, so let's go and see how to create one of these. All right, I don't need that anymore. And it's pretty easy. You can use the new session wizard. Pretty much everybody I've seen demonstrating these have always just gone to new session, and it's still pretty easy to use. So once this comes up, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it temp DB growth. And I can start it at sessions every time the server starts. I can start it immediately after it's created. And if I want to, I can watch the live data. Now this live data is only, you know, right now. Once I close Management Studio, it's not going to automatically pop up the live data again. I'd have to go in and do that. So I'm going to go over to events. Now I know what the event is that I need to capture, but in the demo after this, I'm going to show you how you can figure out how I learned that and how you can figure it out for your own. So let's file, size, change, that one right there. And you get some little explanations down here. I know this one is it just because I've done the work to figure that out. I'm going to click configure. This has got to be selected. I really don't need anything in the global actions. I'm going to go over to the filter and I'm just going to change that to database name equals tempdb, put whatever I need to here. And then on the event fields, you know, I can go ahead and check that or not. So now I've got the definition pretty much set up, but I also must also go over to the data storage. So I can add the ring buffer, and I probably don't want to leave it at these defaults. I don't want this to get really, really large. I've noticed if I query this, which I am going to be doing, I want to make sure that it's not querying a large number of events, because I'm going to be querying XML, and that can really cause performance problems. So I'm going to just leave it to 100 events. And let's see, I can't really remember how I typically set this up. I think I just set that to 5 maybe. I'm not going to worry too much about it. And then I'm also going to go ahead and set up my event file. And by default, it goes to the same folder that your SQL Server log file, event log file goes. Not your database log files, but your event log goes. And you also might want to make it, you know, much smaller. Otherwise, you'll have these giant files sitting there, which is kind of silly. There are a number of other ones from which to choose. And I'm thinking, does this one? Yeah, I'm not even sure. The only one I've ever really paid that much attention to, and I didn't notice this pair matching one, that might be something to use. It might be new. I haven't noticed that one before. Histogram, what that one does, it's kind of like a group by. You get a list of events, and then you get totals. I could go ahead and set this one up too. So base buckets on let's make it is automatic. Okay, so that you create the buckets. It's basically like doing a group by query. So let me go ahead and click OK. And now it automatically is started because I checked that box whenever it brought up this live data item. And I can go ahead and do something that's going to make TempDB grow. I'm throwing a very big table into TempDB, and then I'm going to shrink TempDB. Notice that I really was interested in measuring TempDB growth. However, once this runs, you'll see that it captured both things. And I'll explain more about that in the next demo. And let's see, oh, you can see the database file size change already happening. And let's do this is automatic. You know, some of them were, it looks like these were, some were automatic based on creating that. Let's see, let's do a size change also. Some were automatic based on the fact that it automatically grew to accommodate that temp table, but at some point it was shrinking and it was not automatic. It was something that I did on purpose because I shrunk TempDB. Okay, and while we've got it here, let's also take a look at this histogram. So you can see that there were 25 times that it was true, is automatic was true, and 11 times that is automatic was false. So that's what the histogram does. And did I zoom it? I did find it. I should just hit that automatically start up. Is there?
So the screens are coming through fairly well. Just a FYI. So.
Pardon me?
The screen, your screen is coming through, so it's all legible, all readable.
Okay, good. So I don't have to worry too much about that. All right.
And then there is a question. Todd's got a question.
Okay.
Todd, you want to ask it?
Sure. Hi, Kathy. This is Todd.
Hey, Todd.
Hello. So I know some people have misgivings about using the Database Engine Tuning Advisor, and it does some good, bad, and ugly things, but it is a useful tool for people new to SQL Server and for junior DBAs. I do know that in order to use that tool, one of the inputs is to use the output of a profiler trace. Do you know if extended events can do something similar, like extended events can create a file that can be consumed by the Database Engine Tuning Advisor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do not believe it can be. And there was also something else that came out about the time that extended events came out. There was another functionality, I can't remember what it was called, where you had to use Profiler and like simulate like different workstations having a load, you know, a T-SQL queries coming in at once. And I can't remember what that feature is called.
Distributed replay.
Yeah, that's it. That also needs Profiler. No, I think that's part of the reason that Profiler is still around, because as far as I know, extended events cannot be used for those, as far as I know, because this is going to be this XML file, and I'm not sure exactly what Profiler gives. I think it's a binary file. So that is something that we should talk to Microsoft about changing. You know, seems like they're starting to listen to us a little more. So great question.
Cool. Thank you.
But yeah, that made me cringe a little when you said that Database Tuning Advisor. I hate that thing. All right. Okay, so I've mentioned Profiler and Trace frequently throughout this session. And if you're like me, you have your certain favorite traces that you use, you know, or it seems like it's just easy to figure out what you need, you know, and you might have traces already on your servers that you're going to need to replicate somehow. So how in the world do you map these things? You know, they're not going to map one-to-one. So let's take a look at that. All right, so you can kind of, also have a TempDB growth trace running right now. And here's just to show you how different it is. This is the old-fashioned one, and this is the definition. I mean, that's just ugly. You got to figure out what all these numbers are. You know, that's the code to set up the old-fashioned trace, where I showed you in the slide, the statement to do something similar with extended events is pretty easy. All right, so what do? How do you get that definition? Let's say I've got these traces that have been running for years. How do I get those definitions back? Well, first of all, you really got to go step by step. Run this particular query, and this is all documented out. Do I have the? Yeah, I have the link in the code here, and I will send you guys the slides and the code. So the first thing I do is take a look at the traces that are running. So, oh, it's not running. Okay, so I'm going to have to create this. And that does not look like the right one. My SQL Server must have restarted somewhere along the line. Okay, let's run that one, and I'm just going to make this a 1 here because I don't want to go looking for that file. Okay, it's trace ID 2 is what it is, but now that it's running, when I run this, now we can see, you know, here's this particular trace that I'm interested in. Number 1 is the default trace that automatically runs with SQL Server. So Microsoft is still using trace. Okay, so now that I have that number 2, now I'm going to use that as an argument in all these other functions. So I can't remember offhand what each one returns. I'll probably just have to describe it as it comes up. Okay, so this one is returning the events. In my original trace, I was capturing event 92 and 93. So do I still have that up here? You can see 92 and 93. So that's what I was capturing, and that is what's coming back. So data file auto grow, log file auto grow is what I'm measuring. And the next query is going to tell me what columns I'm returning. This is useful. I think probably what I would do is not worry too much about this one unless there was something really odd that I was capturing, you know. So this is telling me, you know, all the different columns, and most of these, you know, obviously client process ID is something extra, but a lot of these are things that are going to be automatically captured whenever I create my extended event session. But at least this tells me what I'm capturing now. Obviously, you can also put filters. And again, Microsoft has got all of this documented. But there are some limitations here. So I can look at my filters. And the problem is that, so it comes back and it tells me on each event, tells me my event name, and on column database ID, I'm using =2 for TempDB. Now this is the problem right here, this logical operator. It can be 0 or 1. 0 means I'm just using a straight filter. If this is a 1, it means that I could be using AND, I could be using or, but it doesn't tell you which one. So I find that that's not as helpful as it could be, because and or are obviously very different. Okay, so I know that I'm filtering on database 2, and then this lovely query does the mapping for me. So when I have trace event 92, that's data file auto grow, don't really care about that. My extended event name is file size change. And if you remember, when I created that extended event session a couple demos back, that's what I grabbed. This is how I figured this out, by running this query. And then also it maps the trace columns, which are numbered in the original, and it applies it to the extended events actions, not so much the things that you automatically get. I believe they'll show up here if you have a filter on it. Let me think, is this going for the specific? I can't remember if this is a specific one or if okay. What I did here is I put in filters for everything that I could find in Profiler for anything to do with files growing and shrinking. Okay, so it's my trace session, I only was measuring 92 and 93, but in this case, I'm also measuring 94 and 95. So what you end up with is the mapping here, the extended event name, and also the extended event actions, things that are extra that you might be interested in, not necessarily based on the session that you've got. And if I scroll down, let's go here. So I've got like 92, 94, 93, 95. Notice that even though I've got 4 different trace events, they all map to database file size change, whether it's an auto growth or on purpose, whether it is shrinking a file or growing a file, it all maps to this one event, okay? So that may or may not be a good thing depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so that's how I figured it out. And you could do that for, kind of go through this process with any traces that you've got. And again, I've got the link at the top of the demo that shows where I got the information. And another thing too, Jonathan Cahias, that many of you may be familiar with, I don't know if he's kept it up to date, but I know at one time he had a stored procedure that you could use to run through a profiler trace, and it would create a script for you for the extended event. I don't know if he's kept that up to date, but I know that at one time he did that. He's one of the handful of people that were really proponents of this. I would say Jonathan Cahias, Aaron Stellato, and also Grant Fritchie, who I now work with. And if you go out to SQL Server Central and go to the Stairway series, Aaron has got a Stairway series on extended events. Between watching sessions from Grant and watching sessions from Aaron and also her Stairway series, that's how I pretty much learned everything that I know about them. And so it just seems like those 3 people have really been the proponents of this and really got the rest of us kind of kicked in gear. All right, any questions before I move on to the next thing? Okay. All right. I talked about how the extended event itself is not going to give you any kind of an alert or email. So what good is it really, unless you know something bad has happened? What good is it really? So what you can do is query the XML in the ring buffer. And it's really important that you choose the ring buffer because that's going to be very lightweight and small, and it will query fast. Otherwise, it could just take forever to query it. So you can query the XML. I'm going to show you how to do that. And you can set up a SQL agent job to run periodically, or you can capture with a monitoring tool. Since I work for Redgate, I'm going to just show you real quick how to do that with our product called SQL Monitor. Okay, so first, I have a, let's see. Oh no, SQL, it's not running. It would have been nice to have that running ahead of time. And it probably won't matter. And I thought I had a job already set up. There it is. Watch temp DB growth. So let's bring up the, well, let me first show you the query. This query is an ugly looking query, and I realize that. However, there's only a couple little pieces you have to change. You got to make sure that you've got a ring buffer in place. And again, I recommend a small ring buffer that doesn't have, you know, not that 1,000, just 100, because you will, even at 200, you'll start to see this take a long time to run if it's got 200 events. You have to make sure you've got the ring buffer set up. Change this name right here to match exactly the name of your extended event. Okay. The other thing that you want to do is if, you know, you decide you want to have this go out and capture this every 5 minutes or this is every hour. So this number right here is 60 minutes. What it's going to do is go out and query this for the last 60 minutes. Let me go ahead and then what I've got is if the count is over 0, then raise an error. So basically, I don't want this airing out because temp2b grew yesterday, right? I just want in the last small time period, did temp2b grow? So this should air out, and there's the error message. So all I have to do is set up a job and pop that query that I just showed you, making sure that the name is the same and making sure that you understand, you know, the time period. So you might want this to be, maybe you want it 30 minutes and then you're going to run this job like every 15 minutes or something like that, whatever you decide to do. So then now when I run this, it should air out because tempdb has grown. Okay, so that's how you might do that. The other thing you might do, for example, if you own SQL Monitor, you can go into the custom metrics and set up, this is actually a different one, set up custom metrics to do the similar kind of thing, except I'm not going to have an error fire. In this case, it's configuration items change, that one that I ran earlier where I made all those changes and then changed them back. And the cool thing about custom metrics is that if you want to create your own, you can go out to, let's see, this page right here. I got to make a lot of clicks. And there's a bunch of them that are out there that are already available. And this is actually the one that I'm showing you right now. It gives you instructions on what to do. Here's, you know, a session, and you have to create your extended event session. It gives you the code for that. And then here's the T-SQL query. So you've got 2 steps. So it's pretty straightforward. So that way it will fire as an alert. If you want to be notified by email, if you want it to just show up in your server properties, if you want to add it to a report, whatever you want to do, same idea. So that's pretty simple to do. Okay, any questions?
No questions on chat. Todd posted a link to SQL Skills blog post about SQL trace and extended events, just FYI.
Say that a little louder.
So Todd posted a link to a blog post. I think one of the ones that you were mentioning earlier.
Jonathan's probably.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. And Aaron Stellato has a really great session as well on, you know, how to, I think it's something like how to drag DBAs kicking and screaming to extended events. That's really good. All right. So I've talked about this, query the XML, and, you know, how in the world do we actually do this? Well, I just gave you a really simple way to do it. I've given you the query, 2 little spots you've got to change. So that's easy enough. But what if there are other things other ways you want to filter this? Okay, so for example, if we look at, let's say we want to make this not the job. What if we want to make an extended event session that captures any kind of file size change? Okay. Do we want to set up one specific, maybe specifically for TempDB? Do we want to set up one specifically for autogrowth? You know, there's all these different things, and you saw that it was just one item that we need to capture. So you really have 2 choices here. You can either set up multiple events, multiple sessions, and then set up different filters so that you've got different extended event sessions going for all these different things. Let's say you want to, you want to monitor TempDB growth, no matter what happens. You want to monitor auto shrink, like there's this auto shrinking going on, or shrinking going on files, and you can't figure out where it's coming from, and you want to, get to the bottom of it. Whatever it is, maybe we'll want to have a different session on that and set up the filter. So, what's the way to do that? You could set up multiple extended event sessions, or you can also set up one extended event session that just monitors file growth, and then do different reports against it, or SQL agent jobs, or whatever you want to do against that one extended event session. But you're going to have to query that. And that's where that, I guess I showed that slide too soon about, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not an expert on XML. There is actually, in my SQL Server, my beginning T-SQL book, there is a chapter on querying XML. Yeah, when I studied for a certification exam a few years ago, I haven't done any lately, I went back to my book and tried to relearn this stuff. My own book that I wrote, I had to go back because I just didn't remember it. I don't work with it. Okay, so this is kind of what the, this ring buffer that comes back that I said it's what you want to query. And even the storage file and the, all of it, it comes back in XML, okay? It all comes back in XML. So this is what it looks like. And we're gonna use this X query to query it. So the first step is just taking this file that you get back, and it starts with ring buffer target, ends, so this is the root node, ring buffer target, there's the end. And we're just gonna take that and kind of shred it into the different events, okay? So you're not going to have to write this yourself. Don't worry. I'm just going to try to help you understand it in case you want to make additional changes, like add filters. So don't worry, and there won't be a test. So what I want to do is shred this so that instead of looking at one big file, I'm going to split it up into multiple events. If I query that, I'll get it back like this. I'll get back multiple XML documents. I no longer see ring buffer target. I just see these individual documents about each event that has fired. If TempDB has grown 100 times, I'll get back 100 rows here. So that's the first step. That's what that query that I showed you earlier does. This is the first thing that it does. All right. Now, inside each event, it looks like this. And if you are not familiar with XML, I'm kind of familiar with it, not great, but you have elements. Elements you'll see look like that. There are these like major headings here are elements, okay? And also have attributes. Attribute is kind of like a property, timestamp equal. So every element can have some attributes. There are different styles of XML. I don't care about other XML files. I'm only talking about the files that come from extended events. So what I'm talking about tonight, don't go and apply to other things unless you do a little bit more research, because this is very specific to the extended event XML file that comes back. All right, within the event, there is an array of data elements. These are those default items that you get for that specific event. So in this case, for the database file size change, there are a number of default data elements that come back. There are also optionally some action items. You'll only see those if you added them to your extended event session. Okay, so these are arrays. I can have multiple data items like I do. I could even have multiple data items named duration. You will not see that in extended events, but other XML you could see that. In this you will not. You will just see each data point being a very specific little section. Okay, so far you've seen what happens if we applied the node function. You get individual events. Another function that I want to show you is the value function. With the value function, you can bring back, it's like a scalar function. You can bring back just the answer, one answer. And it looks like this. So if I want to bring back, or I want to filter on the timestamp, and this timestamp is UTC, then it looks like this. I'm starting at the very root element event, so I don't have to specify that there. And in parentheses, I've got at timestamp. That's how I designate an attribute. Notice that I've got this one here in brackets. Because this data comes back as an array, anytime we use the value function, you have to tell it which item. And it's kind of odd, but it's a one-based array. That kind of makes me feel strange. So anytime I'm working with this XML data for extended events, I'm always going to need to specify one whenever I'm using the value function. Okay, and then the next piece of information you have to supply is the data type. And this is how it maps to a SQL Server data type. So in this case, it's a date time 2. Now, what if I want to, so you saw in the query, I was filtering on the timestamp. We didn't look at it really close. We'll go back and look at that at the demo. What if I want to filter on a specific item? What if I want to filter on the database ID? So the way I do that is I have the value function, I have parentheses around it, you know, it's a function. And in here, I have parens here, and I say, I want to look at one of the data elements, okay? And within that data element, I want to look at the name attribute. Notice that these all have a name attribute. Okay, I want to look at the one where the name is equal to database ID. So I want to look at this specific one. Okay, and then there's only one in this event that is database ID, but I still have to tell it I want the first item, and it comes back as an int. So if you're interested in this and you're like barely understanding it, which I kind of get because it took me a while to figure this out, you know, you can have the slides and kind of go through it later. I'll make sure you guys get the slides and the code. Okay, so let's go back. And it did take me a bit to understand this, what to do. Let's see, I want to go there. All right, so this is that query. And here's my extended event session name. Of course, I'm going with the ring buffer. So previously, the query just did account. Okay, I was just using account. Now I'm going to run this one, and I'm actually going to get back some of the pieces of information. And hopefully it works. Okay, so previously it was XML. By using this value function, I'm able to kind of shred it into tabular form. If I went back to the slide, hopefully you remember that. I showed you that first item, timestamp, that's an attribute of event, and it's a date time too. So when I get back, size change KB is an attribute of the data element, and it's an integer. File name, I don't think I showed the exact same ones in my slides, but you know, it's similar. File name is a supplied sys name. So there we've got all of those. So if for some reason I would like to just find shrinking, what I can do is take that expression up here, copy it into the where clause. So now, hopefully I have some, there we go. So now I'm only showing where the files are shrinking, if for some reason I'm trying to find that. Again, this is, you only have to really go through all this if you're capturing more than what you need to look at. And the query came back really fast, but what I found is once I had about 200 items in that ring buffer, there was a noticeable slowdown. So be really careful. This is not something that's going to perform really well. It's not really going to scale. So all I had to do then, if I want to change this back to count, is get rid of all of these and just change it back to count. Okay, any questions?
Nope, nothing in chat.
Okay. I have a couple of bonus items. Do I still have a little bit of time?
Yeah, of course, you bet.
Okay. These are the questions that have come up before when I've given this talk. I've had the question, well, how do I see the parameters of stored procedures? It's real easy to see that when you're running Profiler, okay? So my good friend and coworker, Grant Fritchie, is a person that really did the research on this, and there is an article that he has on it. So I'll show you how you do that. It is tricky. And I really suggest if you're interested, go out and let's see, is it query behavior? I think it's this one. I don't want it running all the time. I think that's it. There's a specific event you have to capture in order to get those. So I'm hoping that was the right one.
There's one just two below that, store procedure parameter values.
That's it. Thank you. This query behavior one, I'm going to stop it, is for the next demo. Yeah, I'm even telling myself right here to do it. Okay, Kath. It's late. It's already 8:16 in here. So, okay, so I'm going to run a stored procedure and I'm passing in this product ID equals 0. You know, how do I see that? So the problem has been that it's difficult to see that unless you know exactly what you're looking for. And I hope I don't have a filter. I don't have a filter. Okay. I might have to look for it. I can't remember exactly what. I know I saw it earlier today. Maybe I should do a filter here to see if I can get it to come up. I saw it really quickly. Statement contains, I'm just going to say 0 because I know it had, oh, let me say product. There it is. There it is. So that's where I called it. It just took me a little bit to find it. That is actually not what I ran though. That was from earlier today. I ran a different one because I was running 0. But you can find it in the module end or the SQL statement completed. So I don't know if I didn't have it turned on in time for the one I just ran, but this was from this afternoon. Actually, this was from a couple months ago. But that's where you would find it, module in and SQL statement completed. If you're interested, go out and take a look at Grant's article, because obviously he knows a lot more about it than I do. And the other one is interesting, causality tracking. And with this particular one, you can easily find how different items are related. So let's say a query kicks off a auto stats event. You can easily see that those are connected. And again, go out to Grant's article because he tells how to do it. I've got this already set up. And hopefully it will capture it for me. Is that tonight? Yeah. So here's the query. And what it does is it adds this GUID. I can't remember exactly even how to set this up. Like there's a checkbox. I can't remember how to do it even. That's really helpful. But there's a special property you have to set. And again, you can go out to Grant's article and learn how to do it. So here, if I go in here and filter on that value, and I'm going to get rid of the old one. I don't know which one was, let's delete this one, delete. Okay, so if I filter on that, I can see that I did that update statement and there were some auto stats and whatever else happened that's associated with that specific query that ran. So that's also pretty helpful. Yeah, I can't remember. I was thinking there was a, let me stop it. I was thinking that there was a checkbox that you got to check in order to get that. Just an event file. And where is it? I don't even see it. I have to go out to Grant's article and take a look at that. I went out and looked at his article today, made sure that this thing worked, and then didn't even look at where the property is, but there is a property somewhere. So that's really all I've got tonight, unless anybody has any additional questions. Just don't ask me about those bonus items, because obviously I need to go out and study Grant's page again.
I'm not seeing anything new in the chat.
Okay.
Any questions, anyone?
No question
Nope.
from me, but just a big thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, this was awesome. This was fantastic. I don't use extended events much, but it's always good to get a refresher and get a different perspective. So thank you. It was fantastic. You just present in a fantastic way where it's easy to consume. It's easy to understand. So at least for me. So thank you. It was awesome.
I still hate XPath.
Yeah, that X query stuff. Yeah, I'm just not good at it, but I found I could just, you know, take that one query and
Copies.
just make my little make my little substitutions, and that works.
That's generally how I've worked with it too. I've grabbed a snippet from somewhere else and mangled it, but I can't say I've ever really had a handle on it. So thanks for going into that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I suspect if I worked with XML all the time, I would be so good at it. Yeah, I have to go back and look at it every time.
Right.
If somebody asked me in 5 minutes how to do this, I would say, where's my slide? Where's my code? I don't know. You know, so luckily, you know, you can't, I always learned, you know, good programmers write code and great programmers borrow code. Right.
Good stuff.
So,
Yep, that's awesome. Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
thanks so much. All right. Well, I hope to see you guys again, maybe next year.
Yeah, you bet. Maybe at the virtual summit too. So thank you.
I'll be hanging out virtually at the virtual summit. Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Sounds good. Well, have a great evening.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to
Thanks,
see
everyone.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Hey, bye-bye.